Another, bespoke, half-ton granite sphere crashed through the previously impenetrable wall. This time, the Sultan's infantry surged against the gap before the dust cleared. Having withstood 20-plus sieges over the previous 11 centuries, Constantinople, and with it the final vestige of the Roman Empire, was about to fall definitively. By 1453, the culturally Greek population of Constantinople, which considered itself Roman, had dwindled to 50,000. Entire districts had withered. This was the final stronghold of the Eastern Roman Empire, a 1,000-year survival later catalogued as Byzantium. The only constant for the Roman Empire's relocated capital throughout the Middle Ages was its 5-mile system of Theodosian walls, protecting the peninsula's landward border to the west. An army attacking by land would first encounter a serious moat. Beyond that, there was the 25-foot-tall outer wall, with its thick limestone and crenellated ramparts fronting a 60-foot-wide defensive terrace known as the Peribolos. Finally, the inner wall, the Great Wall, stood 40 feet tall and 15 feet thick, studded with 96 massive towers. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos governed a husk. His treasury was empty. His army consisted of 7,000 men, 2,000 mercenaries from Genoa and Venice in high-gloss plate, and the rest of them residents in obsolete Roman gear, overlapping metal scales and quilted linen. Constantinople was surrounded by Ottoman territory, and Constantine knew another siege was imminent. From the Roman Empire's original capital, the Pope offered only prayers. Venice sent excuses. Only Giovanni Giustiniani, a Genoese specialist in siege defense, arrived to help with 700 men. 150 miles away, at the Ottoman court at Edirne, 21-year-old Sultan Mehmed II was trying to escape the shadow of his predecessor, his late father, Murad II. If Mehmed was to secure his position atop the Ottoman Empire and secure the empire's place in history, he needed a technological advantage. In 1452, an engineer named Orban, probably Transylvanian, walked into Constantine's palace, offering long-range artillery that could change civilization. What Constantine could pay was not enough, but Orban knew of another empire, one that was ascendant. He traveled to the Ottoman court and made the same offer. Mehmed quadrupled Orban's asking price and gave him a foundry with a massive labor force. With this deal, Orban brought Western metallurgical secrets. By using a culturally Christian engineer, Mehmed bypassed decades of trial and error. Only months later, Orban finished the Basilica, the royal gun. It was 27 feet of bronze, 8 inches thick. For projectiles, teams of miners quarried blocks of granite to be hand-carved into 30-inch wide spheres. Each ball was bespoke, weighing up to 1,200 pounds, polished to fit the bore. It took dozens of oxen and hundreds of men to transport Orban's Basilica and prevent it from sinking into the spring thaw of the Thracian hinterland. In late March of 1453, 80,000 Ottoman soldiers began the trek to Constantinople, along with the battery of smaller cannons that Orban also provided. Thousands of laborers trudged ahead of the column to level hills, clear trees, and build bridges that splintered under the main gun's weight. The Ottomans arrived at the Central Valley, the lowest point in the terrain. On the night of April 6th, the Sultan ordered his entire army to light campfires across the 5-mile line, announcing their presence. Over the next 6 days, they transformed the landscape, flattening hilltops into stone-paved firing platforms, where they could fire down on the Theodosian walls. The Basilica, which could fire up to 7 times a day, demanded a massive timber frame. It killed anyone who stood too close. On April 12th, the Basilica blasted its first granite ball at Constantinople's defenses. The granite punched into the top layer of the masonry from above. The wall burst outward in blocks the size of wagons. Giustiniani ordered the Byzantine Romans to drape sacks of wool and leather on the outer wall to deaden the impacts. When sections collapsed, they plugged gaps with barrels of dirt. The Ottomans supplied a deluge of white-feathered arrows into the peribolus. Constantinople's defenders fought back with large stones in gravity-powered trebuchets, but the Ottoman position was too far back. Soldiers approached with ladders. The Romans hurled Greek fire and swatted attackers with top-heavy poleaxes. By night, Ottoman laborers filled the moat with debris from nearby villages and the carcasses of pack animals, while fallen chunks of the outer walls slowly piled into a traversable ramp. Day after day, bombardment punched new holes in the walls and its defenders. While the guns hammered the landward walls, Mehmed's navy faced a stalemate at sea. A massive iron chain across the Golden Horn Inlet blocked his fleet. So on day 10, the Ottomans built a 2-mile road of greased planks behind a neutral Genoese colony. Over a single night, thousands of men and teams of oxen dragged 70 ships from the open sea, up and over hills into the Golden Horn that was the city's northeastern border. Mehmed now had the city surrounded, stretching Constantinople's defenses even thinner. On May 29th, day 53 of the siege, the Sultan launched his final assault on the low point of the walls. It was 1:30 a.m. The first wave was the Bashi bazooks, poorly armored and perceived as expendable. For 2 hours, they absorbed Roman arrows and wore out the city's defenders. At 3 a.m., it was time for the second wave, the Anatolians. These were disciplined heavy infantry units in Krug armor, steel plates linked by chainmail. Just before their approach, Orban's Basilica released a final decisive boom, opening a wide hole in the outer wall. The Anatolians ran up the rubble ramp to the new breach, wielding keelage hacking sabers. But the Roman defenders repelled them. Dawn broke as the fighting intensity peaked. It was time for the Janissaries, the Sultan's elite third wave. They charged up the rubble with the yataghan, a forward-curving, razor-sharp blade with no handguard, optimized for close-quarters thrusts and carving. Several hundred of them braced culverins. These early hand cannons released walls of white smoke, along with lethal lead balls. It was among the first mass deployments of infantry firearms ever recorded, and the first in the assault of a walled city. It was too much to handle. The Janissaries pushed the outnumbered defenders into the peribolus. Giustiniani was struck by a shot that pierced his armor. His men carried him away for triage. At the same time, a mile north, a separate group of Ottoman soldiers found a gate known as the Kirkaporta. They climbed the tower and raised the Ottoman flag. The gate had been left unlatched after a defensive raid, a blunder that opened the city from within while the battle was still being contested. Defenders interpreted the sight of Giustiniani being carried away, coupled with the Ottoman flag, as a general retreat. Janissaries pushed further in, facing only minimal resistance now. Constantine XI removed his imperial cloak and entered the maelstrom as a soldier. The final Roman emperor died from a blow delivered and received anonymously. Most of Constantinople's remaining defenders were handled with yataghans that found narrow gaps in Roman neck guards and arm joints. The killing moved into the city's winding residential alleys, followed by systematic violation. Pillagers gravitated to the gold of the churches. By mid-morning, they reached the Hagia Sophia, a giant domed cathedral where thousands were praying for divine intervention. The soldiers separated those who could be sold as slaves. The rest died on the marble floor. By the time Mehmed II rode through the gate at noon, the city was wreckage. According to his chronicler, the Sultan wept as he stood before the Hagia Sophia, dismayed by the shattered grandeur of the Roman state he had studied since childhood, and aware that the empire he was building in its place would also, eventually, decay. The fall of Constantinople was the end of the Middle Ages. It severed the political line of the Roman Empire, which had run for 1,480 years. The city's 7,000-man military defense was entirely erased, along with another 7,000 civilians, while up to 50,000 people were enslaved. The Ottomans searched for Constantine among the dead for days. They found him by his boots, which still carried the embroidered imperial eagles, the one marker he hadn't removed. Ottoman casualties are estimated at over 15,000. One was Orban, who was obliterated by one of his own cannons, possibly the Basilica. The Ottoman Empire now controlled the world's primary trade routes. The Silk Road was under the Sultan's tax, forcing the West to look to the Atlantic, with expeditions by the likes of Christopher Columbus less than 50 years later. Mehmed transformed the city into Istanbul, the seat of a caliphate that would threaten Europe for centuries. With the Basilica cannon, the age of the wall was over. The future belonged to those with the chemistry and the iron to blast projectiles across distances.